Greetings, my peeps, and welcome to the All Things Basketball Podcast with your boy GD. In this episode, we'll be doing our player spotlight on John Thompson, Coach John Thompson Jr. We will cover him, his early life, his high school days, his days at Providence, as well as his brief time in the NBA, as well as him starting to coach at high school and his time at Georgetown up into the Patrick Ewing years. So just sit back and relax and enjoy the show. Okay, guys, so we are in the midst of Black History Month. So that means player spotlights on several very integral figures in the terms of social justice and racial justice and so forth. We so far have done Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. We did Oscar Robertson. Now we are on a giant of a man known as Big John to the Celtics. He was known as the Caddy. I'm talking about John Thompson Jr. Coach John Thompson of Georgetown fame, of course. So he was 6'10", 125 pounds during his playing days. He played between a power forward and a center as a player, but he's well renowned for his coaching acumen. So let's get into it, guys, shall we? So John Thompson was born on September 2nd, 1941 in the Washington, D.C. area. And he was born John Robert Thompson Jr. So his parents were devout Catholics. They were John Robert Thompson Sr., and he was a laborer. He worked in a textile factory. The man got up 5 a.m. Each day for work without an alarm clock. That's saying something, guys. So, and then his mother Anna, she was a trained educator, but was unable to find work in that particular field. So instead, she did what was considered day jobs, like cleaning the homes of white folks back in those days. So Washington at the time during John Thompson's youth, was a segregated city. So in fact, he even said he didn't speak to a white person until he became a teenager. The whites would play basketball at Jelliff Boys Club League, and the blacks would play at Police Boys Club. And John was a tall kid, so it was thought that he should take advantage of his height by playing basketball. So that's what John proceeded to do. And while playing at the Police Boys Club, he met James Jabo Kenner. He was kind of like one of those figures there, kind of a father figure, sort of. And there was him that he also trained other kids, like you may have heard some of these kids, Marvin Gaye, the singer from Motown, and Sugar Ray Leonard. So, but Jabo was well known. He was a devout man of Christ from all the details I've read about him. So, and he was one of those figures that kind of took John under his wing and showed him the ropes, so to speak. So John struggled, though, keeping up with his fellow students due to his inability to read. according to his sixth grade teacher. Her name was Miss Samantha Jackson. So his teacher saw that he couldn't read, so she suggested he get a reading specialist, which he did, which his folks ended up getting him the help he needed in terms of reading. And once that happened, that changed his life and had a huge impact on him later, especially as a coach. The fact that you believe in others and give them opportunities to be successful. So that carried with him throughout his life. So again, he used his height to his advantage by pursuing basketball. His mother, Anna, was adamant about John attending Catholic schools in order for him to get the best education and to challenge him academically. So his parents invested in John's future very much so by sending him to Archbishop Carroll High School. It's one of those Catholic schools, and of course, you have to have some dollars there to enroll your child there. So they did that for John. During his time at the high school, he really excelled playing the center position. In fact, he led his team to 3 championship seasons, including a 55-game win streak. And this took place from 1958 to 1960. In his senior year, they went undefeated at 24-0. And that's within that championship season, of course. So he made all-tournament team and was named second team parade All-American. Upon finishing his 4 years at Archbishop Carroll High School, he attended Providence. At the time, there was 3 schools wooing him at the time. It was Providence, it was St. Joseph's, and St. John's. But he ended up attending Providence after being recruited by the coach there, Joe Mullaney. In his junior year, he, along with senior guard Ray Flynn, led the Providence Friars to a 24-4 record and a NIT championship, which they won over Canisius. So already Big John making a difference at Providence. And then, excuse me, and then by his senior year, he propelled the team to its first ever NCAA tournament appearance with a 20-6 record. And they happened to lose in the NCAA, in their first appearance, first round. They lost to Villanova, a team that was but had players such as Rich Moore and Wally Jones. So John graduates from Providence with an economics degree. So he stays the 4 years, plays basketball 3 of those 4 years. Of course, there's the rule that freshmen can't play with the varsity team, so he has to wait till he's a sophomore. So his career average and his career record there, we'll talk about that. Under him playing, the team went 64-16. In the 3 years of him playing, he averaged 19.2 points per game, 13.4 rebounds, over 53% from the field, and 64.5% from the free throw line. So as he graduated, he was number one in points, scoring average, and field goal percentage. He was second in rebounds to Jim Hadnot. So John Thompson, high up on the charts in terms of career stats at Providence. So, with that said, he ends up being drafted in the NBA's draft in 1964. So he was the third round pick, the 27th overall pick, and that pick was made by the Boston Celtics. So, also in this draft in 1964 was notable players such as Willis Reed, Paul Silas, who I actually did a player spotlight on him due to his recent passing. Wally Jones was in that draft, the same Wally Jones his team lost to in the NCAA tournament. Also, Walt Hazzard, he was actually the number one overall pick. Walt Hazzard coming out of UCLA. And Joe Caldwell, Jeff Mullins, and Mel Counts were also notable players in that draft. Auerbach actually had his eye on John Thompson for a while. And you know, Red Auerbach, he always lays in the weeds to get his guy. So, and he set his sights on John Thompson, and lo and behold, he gets his player. So, he was drafted to be Bill Russell's backup, which he did for 2 seasons. Oh, by the way, in those 2 seasons, 2 NBA championships they would win. In the 1964-65 season, then following that up with the 65-66 season. So, John Thompson's first 2 years in the league, 2 rings. How about that? So, he was left exposed, though, in the 1966 expansion draft and was picked up by the Chicago Bulls. Chicago Bulls being a team just formed. So, John Thompson ends up getting picked by Chicago. But instead of going to Chicago to play, John Thompson chose to retire rather than relocate to this new and foreign city of Chicago. So he preferred to stay in the Washington, D.C. area, which he did upon leaving the Celtics. He goes back home to Washington, D.C., and he actually took a job as a head coach and guidance counselor at St. Anthony's High School. Oh, by the way, during his time with the Celtics, he also, in his off time, earned a master's degree in guidance and counseling at the University of the District of Columbia. So John Thompson already plotting out his future. So he comes back home and takes this job as the head coach and the guidance counselor at St. Anthony's High School in Washington, D.C. During his tenure there, his teams went 122 and 28 overall between 1966 and 1972. In fact, his teams rivaled Morgan Wooten and the powerhouse DeMatha High School that was the cream of the crop at that time. So, John Thompson making an immediate impact in terms of coaching basketball. So Georgetown, in its search for a new coach in 1972, they began their search, and it came down to three candidates: John Thompson, Morgan Wooten, and a college assistant coach by the name of George Raveling. So, what ends up happening? The university gambles and takes a chance on John Thompson, who only had 6 years of coaching experience, as opposed to Morgan Wooten, who's been coaching a while, and at least with George Raveling, he's been an assistant coach in a couple, actually more closely to home at Maryland. He was an assistant coach there. So, but the university, and actually the president at the time at the university, the Reverend Robert Hennell, he actually told this to John Thompson in the interview. He said, "It'd be great if you get us to at least a NIT appearance here and there." So John Thompson, of course, setting his sights real high, but keeping it to himself, said, "Yeah, I think I could do that." So lo and behold, what takes place. So upon John Thompson being hired, he had a few stipulations that he needed met for him to take the job. One of them was that he was to be given some leeway in terms of his recruitment of players, especially those who may not meet the university's admission criteria. So he wanted a little leeway in that regard. And also, in correlation with him setting the standard as far as the leeway with the players, one of his staff hires was Mary Fenlon. Mary Fenlon was a former teacher and nun from his days at St. Anthony's High School. He hired her as his academic coordinator, and then later he named her as an assistant coach. And she was very instrumental in helping John Thompson with the players' academic progress. So John and Mary worked hand in hand to assure that the players were getting the maximum out of their academic achievements. So with that said, they hire him. The school, oh by the way, went, prior to John Thompson's arrival, 3-23, and their only tournament appearance at the time was in 1943. So he's the first black head coach at Georgetown. And Georgetown, its history is Jesuit. Is of Jesuit origin, and the university was built on the backs of slaves. So of course this hire is that much more of, number one, making progress in terms of a racial aspect, and just trying to build a bridge between the university and the city that it represents. So with that said, he also among John Thompson's rules with the players, he required his players to wear a sports coat and tie when they traveled on the road. So John Thompson, early on, equipping his players to dress like gentlemen. So something that I don't think should be taken lightly, to be honest. And then his punishment for a player who skips a class, 5 a.m. practice. So John Thompson setting the rules pretty early. And then what happens on John's first day as this coach now, head coach of this university? His first day, a noose is left in his office. Oh, what a first day, huh? I mean, like, really. Nonetheless, yeah, so that's just a precursor of, a few more things to come here and there. So, anyhow, so after enduring a tough first 2 seasons, things got off to a little bit of a rocky start for Coach Thompson. The first season, they started 12-14. His second season, 13-13. But in year 3, they finally break through with an 18-10 record, and they actually made an NCAA appearance. So already 3 years in, John Thompson surpasses the expectations of the university's president at the time. So they would lose in the first round, though, to Central Michigan, a team that had a player by the name of Dan Ralphfield on the roster. Dan Ralphfield, solid future NBA power forward, and a very good player, by the way. I need to do a spotlight on him one of these days. But I digress. Anyway, so that was year 3. But year 3 wasn't without controversy. During that season, they had an early losing streak, so it seemed like things were going south for the Georgetown Hoyas at the time. So someone took it upon themselves to hang a banner on the roof of the arena with a racial slur on it and requesting for John Thompson to resign, which of course John Thompson, being who he is, did not do so. And as they would say, the rest is history. So in the 1975-76 season, he follows up the first NCAA appearance with a 21-7 record in another tournament appearance. And this time he lost in the first round to Arizona. So the next 2 seasons, despite having records of 19-9 and then 23-8, those teams somehow miss making NCAA tournament appearances. But they did make 2 NITs. One where they lost in the first round and one where they finished in 4th place. So things are starting to slowly improve in Washington, D.C. with those Georgetown Hoyas. At the start of this 1977-78 season, John makes another revolutionary hire in hiring Lorry Michel to his staff as a athletic trainer. And in doing so, guys, you gotta remember, first of all, he hires Mary Fenlon, who eventually becomes an assistant head coach, unprecedented at the time. And then he also follows that up with hiring a female athletic trainer. Again, unprecedented stuff here, guys. Just wanted to make you aware of that. So in the school's last season as an independent, they finished 24-5. 24-5. And they also have they finally get an NCAA tournament appearance. So, and this would start, guys, a streak of 14 straight NCAA appearances. So things are starting to turn, guys. Things are starting to turn around. Oh, by the way, this is the 1978-79 season. So they finished 24-5 NCAA appearance. And oh, by the way, this year is Sleepy Floyd's his freshman year. So Sleepy Floyd, one of his first big time stars at Georgetown University. So, and that team lost in the second round to Rutgers. Rutgers had a guy on there by the name of James Bailey. Very good big man at the time. So Georgetown loses there. So Georgetown, along with Syracuse, St. John's, eventually UConn, also Boston College, Seton Hall, and Providence, they band together to join the Big East Conference. So this is the start of something glorious, guys. The Big East Conference. Oh, by the way, if you ever get a chance, watch the 30 for 30 on the Big East. Such rich history there. You should definitely give that a listen. Well, a watch, rather. So, in their first season in the Big East, 1979-80, the team goes 26-6. They finished tied for third in the division with a 5-1 record. They are the regular season and conference champions, and they make an NCAA appearance. However, they do win in the second round. See, back in those days, you get a bye depending on your record. So their record was so good at the time, they got a bye. So in the second round, they faced Iona and beat them. Iona had Jeff Wooten on that squad. Jeff Wooten was a burly center, very good player. And then in the East Regional Semifinals, they beat Maryland. Maryland had Buck Williams, a very good NBA power forward, and Albert King, the brother of Bernard King. So they beat that team. They did lose, however, in the Eastern Regional Finals to Iowa. Iowa at time was coached by Lute Olson. So the team in the final AP poll finishes 11th. So right now, John Thompson got this thing swinging in the right direction, guys. In the 1980-81 season, they go 12 losses but 20 wins, finishing second in the Big East that year. They lose, however, in the first round to James Madison. Then comes 1981-82. But before we even get to that, no, we'll just deal with it. So what happens is during the 1979-80 season, while scouting one player at a high school, he discovered a sophomore center playing at the time who would eventually be his defensive anchor and a key chess piece in his championship quest. And that center name was Patrick Ewing. And fast forward to 1981-82. It's Patrick Ewing's freshman season at Georgetown, which becomes a full-fledged success, guys. The team finished 30-7. They finished second in the Big East. And here's how their tournament run went. They won in the second round, beating Wyoming. In the regional semis, they beat Fresno State. Fresno State at the time had Rod Higgins. Rod Higgins, a swingman who was pretty good back then in college. Then in the regional finals, they beat Oregon State. Oregon State had a star player in Lester Connor. Then they went to the Final Four. In the Final Four, oh, by the way, he becomes the first African American head coach to coach a Final Four team. So more on that later when we talk about the quotes and so forth. But nonetheless, they beat Louisville. And Louisville had the McRae brothers, Rodney and Scooter, as well as Derek Smith. They had a very good team. Then they make it to the NCAA Finals for the first time in school history. Well, Final Four, first time in school history. They lose, however, to North Carolina 63-62. So 1 point loss to North Carolina. North Carolina, coached by Dean Smith, and had such players as James Worthy, who was the star of that team at the time. They also had a young Sam Perkins and a freshman by the name of Michael Jordan, who happened to hit the clinching shot for the win, by the way, guys. But Georgetown did give North Carolina a run for its money. In fact, the first four baskets they made were off of goaltends by Patrick Ewing. I'll talk more about that when we do the quotes from John Thompson. But yeah, and they had their chance to win. But when Fred Brown inadvertently throws a pass directly to opposing player James Worthy, thus sealing the victory for North Carolina, John Thompson immediately embraces Fred Brown to let him know that, sure, you made this turnover, but me embracing you let you know that this is bigger than basketball itself. So a very noble gesture by John Thompson. So with that said, they lose in the NCAA Finals. So now we go to 1982-83. In that year, in comes two freshmen, Michael Jackson, who will be their point guard of the future, as well as David Wingate, also a integral piece to what John Thompson's trying to do there. So they finished 22-10. They finished fourth in the Big East this time. They win in the first round, beating Alcorn State, but lose, however, in the second round, facing Memphis State, who had a phenom at the time, Keith Lee. So, in the 1981-82 season, they finished sixth in the final AP poll. And in 1982-83, they finished 20th in the final AP poll. But during this season, sophomore Patrick Ewing endured a lot of racial taunts and abuse from opposing fan bases, even from his own fan base, for crying out loud. Some of those fan bases include Providence, Villanova, Boston College, and this is what John Thompson had to say upon dealing with all this. Sooner or later, I'm going to tell my players to go up and get the sign and then see what happens. So, John Thompson not taking the foolishness that's going on there. So let's continue. In 1983-84, this is what I consider John Thompson's finest season as a coach. Team finishes 34-3, finishing first in the Big East. And this was the freshman years for Reggie Jackson and a big man that didn't take any wooden nickels, as the older folks would say, Michael Graham. And that set the wheels in motion, guys. So this is how their tournament ended up. They had a first round bye. They won in the second round, beating SMU. SMU at the time had a center named John Koncak. In the regional semis, they would beat UNLV, who had Richie the Animal Adams at the time. The regional finals, they beat Dayton. Dayton had a strong team at that time. Cedric Toney was on that squad. And also, who else was on that team? Cedric Toney, who I can remember right now. So, on to the Final Four. So he makes a Final Four, his second in 3 years, facing Kentucky. Kentucky had a strong squad with Sam Bowie, Mel Turpin, but Georgetown prevails, beating Kentucky, thus making it to the Final Four in an epic battle between Georgetown and the Houston Cougars. Houston Cougars at the time had what was called Phi Slamma Jamma. That was a terrific team, guys. That team had Akeem Olajuwon, Alvin Franklin, and Michael Young. So actually, they had Clyde Drexler had just graduated the year before. So, but Guy Lewis, the coach there, still had a monster team. But Georgetown prevailed over Houston, 85-74. Thus, John Thompson gets the brass ring. He becomes the first African American coach to win a NCAA championship. So, and I'll read the quote again. He has a pretty profound quote for this accomplishment, but basically the sum of it is saying that he got the opportunity because others did not. So, and of course, this paved the way for other coaches to also African American coaches to win NCAA championships. Just a few to name: Nolan Richardson of the University of Arkansas, Tubby Smith, who coached at Kentucky and got a championship, and more in recent history, Kevin Ollie got one with UConn. So, but nonetheless, John Thompson making history here. and thus putting Georgetown officially on the NCAA map. And they finished that year actually number 2 in the final AP poll. So then we go on to 1984-85 season. And how do they follow that up? They go 35-3, finishing second in the Big East. And here's how their tournament run went. They won in the first round, beating Lehigh. Then in the second round, John Thompson faces his friend John Chaney and his Temple Owls, and they beat them. They move on to the regional semis, where they beat Loyola of Illinois. And on that team was Alfrederick Hughes, who was an outstanding basketball player. And the Hoyas were able to beat them. Regional finals, they faced Georgetown. Georgetown was a solid team at the time. Bruce Dalrymple, they had him there, Mark Price, and John Sally. And Georgetown was able to beat them. Then they move on to the Final Four. The Final Four actually had 3 Big East teams in the Final Four. One of which was St. John's, who Georgetown beat in the Final Four. And that team had, of course, Chris Mullin was on that squad, Walter Berry, and Bill Winnington. So they hadn't got Mark Jackson. I believe he came a year after. So, but they were able to beat St. John's in the Final Four. And then in the NCAA Finals, they actually lost to Villanova 66-64. And what many call the perfect game that Raleigh Massimino and those Villanova Wildcats put together. That squad had Ed Pickney, Dwayne McClain, and some out-of-this-world shooting from a guy named Harold Jensen. So let this sink in, guys, and then I'm going to cut it off here, and then we'll finish with the rest of his history and so forth. Let this sink in. They make three NCAA finals. Win one, lose one by a point, lose the second one by 3 points. So basically 3 points separated them from being 3-time NCAA champions. Let that sink in, guys. And that's 3 within a 4-year period. That's some outstanding stuff, guys. So, and this would happen to be Patrick Ewing's final game, that Villanova game. So guys, I'm going to cut it off there. I still have more to get to, including John Thompson staging a protest over an NCAA rule that I will explain on the other side. Also, how he had to confront a notorious figure to keep away from his players, and also how he recruited a young troubled man who he basically turned his life around, and that young man eventually becomes a Hall of Famer, and much more. So I'll have that on the other side. All right, guys? So once again, I thank you for listening. And again, if you like what you're hearing, guys, you can drop a review on my website, all things basketball with GD.com. I'm also on Apple now, Apple Podcasts. You can leave a review there. YouTube, this will be there in due time, and you can leave comments and definitely like the episode. Hit the like button. All right, guys. So with that said, we'll come back with the second half of the John Thompson Player Spotlight. All right. Until then, guys, take care. So, my peeps, if you like what you're listening to, you can go to my website, www.allthingsbasketballwithgd.com. You can also email me at thatsportsdudegd@gmail.com. To support this podcast, you can go to my PayPal, and that email is thatsportsdudegd@gmail.com. Also on my Anchor page, I have a support button there that you can also use to help the podcast. I'm on all the major platforms like Anchor, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, Amazon, SoundCloud, YouTube, Castbox, Radio Public, Podchaser, just to name a few. And also you can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Clubhouse, and Fanbase. So, once again, I thank you for listening and supporting this podcast. And take care and be safe.